Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're taking a look at a single nation that literally holds the keys to the entire global supply chain. I mean, when you think of international trade, you probably picture massive shipping megacorporations, right? Or giant global superpowers. But as you'll see, the true backbone of the oceans, the actual human driving force navigating the world's commerce, is the Philippines.
To put this into perspective, let's start with a quick, kind of terrifying hypothetical. What if 400,000 Filipino seafarers went on strike for just 72 hours? Sounds like a plot for a Hollywood disaster movie, doesn't it? But the reality is, everyday life as we know it would grind to a sudden, absolute halt. Literally, if these maritime workers just stopped steering the ships that carry our electronics, our clothes, our food, and our fuel, the world would face an immediate apocalyptic freeze.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that freeze would happen. Roughly 1 out of every 4 merchant mariners globally, so literally 25% of the entire worldwide seafaring workforce, is a Filipino national. That is an absolutely astonishing market share for one single country. It proves just how incredibly reliant global commerce is on this one specific workforce. Without them, the gears of global trade just stop turning.
Let's walk through the domino effect of this hypothetical freeze because it gets crazy fast. International maritime law mandates minimum safe manning levels. That means ships literally cannot legally leave port without enough certified crew. So overnight, bam, 25% of the world's commercial fleet is grounded. Next comes supply chain collapse and hyperinflation. Since 90% of global trade moves by sea, container ships carrying everything from auto parts to life-saving medical supplies would just stall out. Then a global energy crisis hits as oil and LNG tankers sit completely idle, instantly spiking gas and electricity prices. Oh, and fun fact, over 60% of cruise liner staff are Filipino, meaning ocean tourism shuts down entirely too.
So, how did one country corner the market on ocean navigation? Well, that brings us to Section 1, Maritime History, a 1,000-year legacy. This dominance isn't some recent accidental trend.
Let's move to and see how this built, because it goes way back. We're talking 320 AD with the Belenge. These were edge-pegged plank boats carrying entire clan communities across the Pacific long before European galleons even existed. Fast forward to 1565 and the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade, where native Filipino crewmen, known as Manilamen, navigated these dangerous multi-month voyages to the Americas. Actually, fun piece of trivia, in 1763, some of these seafarers jumped ship and established St. Malo in Louisiana, making it the very first Asian-American settlement in North America. Then in 1820, we get the Escuela Náutica de Manila, the first formal nautical school in all of Asia. Finally, the modern era kicks off in 1974 when overseas deployment was officially institutionalized by the government.
Which brings us to Section 2, the global seafaring boom, focusing on the 1970s shift. You kind of have to ask yourself, why did the whole world suddenly pivot to hiring Filipino crews in the late 20th century?
Well, the answer really lies in the harsh economics of the 1970s. It was essentially a 3-step catalyst. Step 1, the 1973 global oil crisis causes fuel costs to absolutely skyrocket. Step 2, Western shipping companies are suddenly bleeding money and simply can't afford expensive Western crews anymore. They desperately needed cost-effective alternatives. Step 3, the 1974 Philippine Labor Code hits. The Philippines offered what became known as the Pinoy advantage, meaning high English proficiency, rigorous training, and much lower labor costs. The government scaled up maritime academies, essentially creating this massive pipeline of highly skilled talent exactly when global shipping companies needed it most.
And the result of that pivot? It is staggering. $6.7 billion. That is the amount of direct remittances Filipino seafarers send back home every single year. The overall seafaring industry actually generates over 1 trillion Philippine pesos in economic impact. That drives nearly 4% of the country's entire GDP. It is a total economic powerhouse for the nation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is who is actually doing the hiring. You see a lot of ships flying flags of convenience, registered in places like Panama or Liberia. But the true maritime superpowers are completely dependent on Filipino labor. Japan heavily relies on them for dry bulk and container ships. Greece, the world's top ship-owning nation, uses them for cargo and tankers. Norway and Germany trust them to handle highly specialized LNG, chemical, and offshore vessels. And the US and UK? They rely on them to run those major international cruise liners. The greatest fleets in the world are, literally, crewed by Filipinos.
But we really need to look past the macroeconomics for a second and get into Section 3, Life on the High Seas, the Hard Realities. This isn't just about trade data, it's about the human element.
To really understand that human side,
Look at the stark financial contrast aboard these ships. A captain or a chief engineer, they can make anywhere from $8,000 to over $12,000 a month. These salaries are absolutely transformative. They allow families back home to build houses, start businesses, and fund educations. It literally lifts entire rural communities out of poverty. But on the other hand, entry-level cadets or messmen might bring in maybe $1,000 to $1,500 a month. So it's an industry of incredible opportunity, but definitely one where you have to grind and work your way up the ranks.
And honestly, those salaries come with some incredibly harsh trade-offs. First off, extreme isolation. Contracts usually run anywhere from 6 to 10 months at sea. That means super limited internet, intensely long hours, and missing out on major family milestones. Then you have the terrifying geopolitical dangers. These mariners are frequently navigating through literal war zones like the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Black Sea. We're talking real threats of missile strikes, drone attacks, and piracy. On top of all that, there's intense regulatory scrutiny. International bodies constantly audit training standards, which means tens of thousands of jobs are just constantly hanging in the balance based on international compliance.
Yet, despite all that danger and isolation, there's this really beautiful resilience to this workforce. They essentially create a floating village. To survive being away from home for up to 10 months at a time, crews build this deep, tight-knit community aboard these giant steel ships. They cook traditional food, they celebrate holidays together, and yes, for sure, there's absolutely karaoke happening right in the middle of international waters. It's just a wonderful testament to how they maintain their sanity and their connection to home while floating thousands of miles away.
So, the crucial point is, what comes next? Let's transition to Section 4, upgrading the economy and the shift to production. How does the Philippines move from sending its people away to building wealth at home?
For families to stay together, it requires a massive structural economic shift. Right now, the current state is a consumption-based, labor export economy. Basically, the country exports raw materials and heavily relies on overseas work to fund domestic spending. But the future state, that needs to be an industrialized, high-value production economy. The ultimate goal is to keep this highly skilled maritime labor at home, transforming the nation from just an exporter of talent into a fully self-sustaining industrialized powerhouse. So how exactly do they get there? Well, the sources outline a strategic 5-point transition plan. First, build local shipbuilding and transshipment hubs. Give the tax breaks and infrastructure so seafarers can operate and repair vessels domestically. Second, invest in value-added manufacturing. Basically, stop exporting raw goods and start making finished products locally. Third, upgrade the tech sector from low-cost call centers to high-value knowledge process outsourcing, so professionals can earn Western-level salaries remotely. Fourth, modernize agriculture with better logistics and tech to raise rural incomes. And finally, actively help returning overseas workers reinvest their savings into venture capital and local businesses. Turn former migrant workers into local job creators.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question to ponder. Is the world prepared for a future where Filipino mariners actually choose to stay home? Think about it. If the Philippines successfully executes this inward economic pivot, that 25% of the global maritime workforce might just decide they don't need to sail for foreign flags anymore. And as we saw at the start of this explainer, the global supply chain is way more fragile than we ever realize. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll leave you to think about that until next time.